Electrocast.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is Saturday morning, and this episode is brought to you by our new sponsor, Jeremy Clevenger Fitness, who we featured on episode 145. Now, if you haven't heard that episode, I encourage you to go back and take a listen. Well, I have another great show lined up for you, but before we get started, I just want to remind you to take a look at the leadership books on my website. Harry Truman once said that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So if you're not reading leadership books today, I highly encourage that you get started. Now, I've written 3 leadership books, and I highly recommend that you start with I Have the Watch first. It's filled with 22 short stories that will help you become a leader worth following. It's a quick read, and most people finish it in less than 3 hours. It's available on Kindle and on Audible, so you can listen to it in the car or while you're working out. And a Spanish version is also in the works. So check out all my books on Amazon or on my website, johnsrennie.com. I also wanted to mention that Deep Leadership is now ranked in the top 2.5% most popular shows out of 3 million podcasts globally, according to Listen Score. Now, we're closing in on the top 100 management podcasts in the U.S. as well. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening in every week and sharing these episodes with your friends. You have helped this podcast grow into a top-performing show. So thank you very much. Well, that is it. Today, we're going to be talking about strategic narratives, and my guest is Guillaume Wiatr, and he's going to show us why strategic narratives are critical for organizational alignment. Now, if you're ever wondering how to get your entire team on the same page, you're going to love this discussion. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Guillaume Wiatr. Guillaume is an entrepreneur, consultant, marketing strategist, university educator, author, and speaker. He's the author of a new book called Strategic Narrative, a simple method that business leaders can use to help everyone understand their business, get behind it, and believe in it. And I wanted to get him on the show to talk about this idea of a strategic narrative and why it's so important that you have it as a leader for your business. So, Guillaume, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be. It's just a pleasure to be here, and I'm ready to dive deep.
Well, good. You're on the right show then. Perfect. I wanted to just set the stage before we dive into the subject of strategic narratives. But tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're an entrepreneur. You've done a lot of different projects. How did you end up in the world of leadership consulting and business consulting?
I initially thought when I was very young that leadership is a title, and I quickly found out that it's not a title. It could be correlated to a title, but it's not necessarily caused by a title. Leadership is to me a practice. It's a chance. It's an opportunity that you may want or need to seize sometimes. And very early on in my career, I was lucky enough to be presented with that opportunity to help people figure out complex technical projects, technical difficulties, and adapt through drastic changes in my area of consulting and strategy. And I started my career right before the dot-com boom era, so 20-something years ago in France. And I had previously traveled the world in the Navy. I was on a helicopter carrier. And so I had that very, I think, interesting interest for multicultural environment and making people work together. And one day I was brought on a project where I thought, what was the topic of the project was something very technical. I had some knowledge about e-commerce, and I was brought on to help at a large company, and in the first 30 minutes of the first meeting, the kickoff meeting that I was in charge of preparing, I realized the problem was not technical at all. It was a team problem. So I had 2 choices: follow my scripted agenda to talk about technical stuff, or derail my own meeting and really talk about the elephant in the room. And with the risk of not pleasing everybody, but just doing what's right. That's the course I took. And it was a dangerous course, but a few months later, it helped us to really achieve greater results that I could have anticipated. The team worked together finally well. So that's my background. That's how I had the chance to just jump into a situation where my leadership capacities were tested.
And that's a lot of times the best ways to do it is getting those opportunities those swings at bat, if you will, to practice leadership.
I believe that. I don't think I was. I'm still. I mean, I probably learned leadership my whole life, and it will take me It should take me multiple lives to learn leadership.
Yes. Really,
but yeah, I had this chance. I think I made some mistakes along the way. I learned from my mistakes, but I believe this it starts where at least that's where it started for me. So
outstanding. And your company is called MetaHelm. And what do you do to help business leaders? What kind of services do you provide? And tell us a little bit about the origin story for your company's name, because that's an interesting name.
So MetaHelm is based in Seattle, Washington, West Coast of the United States. I have clients a little bit all over the world. Only a small portion of my clients are in the United States. I have clients on pretty much all continents at this point. Oh, wow. And what we do is that we specialize in what I call strategic narrative, which we'll talk about this in a moment. And what a strategic narrative does for leadership of my clients' organization is that it helps them do two things. One is align people better, and two is accelerate the speed of innovation. So I work with mostly founders, business owners, and CEOs of companies who I call transformative. I call them transformative because they are on a trajectory to transform one of three things typically. Either their industry. Those companies come up with new processes, new patent, new IP. They want to change the way the industry has worked for a long time. The second reason why I call them transformative is because they want to transform people's condition. So an example would be companies in the healthcare industry who are really set to transform people's life. And a third reason why they're transformative is because, and that's a growing part of my business right now, is transforming our environment and our society. Mm-hmm. More and more companies use business as a force for good, and they actually use typical traditional businesses to actually impact their environment in a different way. So that's what my business does. Why is it called MetaHelm? So this is my fourth venture. That's my fourth business. And with this one, I didn't have a co-founder. And so I was the sole owner of the responsibility to find a name. And I thought, okay, how do you find a real good name that is really aligned with what I want to do in that situation? And I had researched, I had more time to research how other founders found the name for the company. And I came across some examples where there was something tied to the founder and something tied to the background of the founder. So Helm is actually the second part of my first name, Guillaume. Yeah. And a helm is, I'm a sailor, and a helm is what sets the course of a ship. And I immediately thought, that's a good sound. I like it. It has a connection with me. And that's what I want to provide to my clients. It's help them setting a better direction for their ship, their company. Right. So, and then I also always thought that Meta sounded cool. And I was way before Facebook decided to rebrand. And I thought MetaHelm, yes, it's actually the company that guides the guides to be better guides. And that was exactly what what I wanted my value proposition to be. And I checked if that name was taken and that name was available. That's something that many people don't think about, but you've got to make sure that you can use actually this name without causing any problem. So that's the story behind my name.
Very good. I like the idea of the helm. As a Navy guy myself, so I can appreciate that. Absolutely.
I figured you'd appreciate that too.
Absolutely. So you work on and you write about strategic narrative. So help us understand. You talked a little bit about it, but help us understand what a strategic narrative is. And how is it just different from, your typical business storytelling? Because we've talked about storytelling on this podcast before, but this is something different. This is something special. What is it and how is it different?
So just like most business people, I found myself using the word story and narrative kind of interchangeably in my daily language for many years. And very quickly, I thought, this storytelling is so important. How come we're not taught about this? So I started buying books on storytelling maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I was so engrossed, so attracted by this topic that I was reading books after books on this topic. And naturally, that started to show through my work. And people started to recognize me for this new skill set of being able to help them tell better stories. So people would come naturally to me and say, can you help me tell my story? And that's kind of something we hear all the time, like, hey, we got to tell our story, or what's your story? And so I jumped on that marketing and strategy bandwagon as it started, leaving the station 10, 15 years ago. And I thought I do storytelling. And one day I thought, wait a minute, why do we have story and narrative? There must be a reason why there are two words. And it was at the same time where I thought that the traditional way to do business storytelling has something that feels inauthentic, has something a little bit broken. We borrow this mindset from movie making. But the problem is that in a movie, you can make up any story you want. In reality, you should not make up any story you want. You should, in my opinion, as my values, strive to and try to tell the truth. So I thought there is something off here. However, I also hear everybody talking about the narrative about society, the narrative about economy, the narrative about a type of product, the narrative about politics, the narrative about religion. So I thought there is something here I need to explore. And in doing some research, I found that, there are actually two different meanings for those two different words. A story as typically, so I'm going to try to give you and our listeners some very, very concrete and distinct, pointers here. A story, think about a story as a single unit inside a large system of other stories that form a narrative. Another metaphor is, if a narrative is a galaxy, a story is one planet or one star, right? If you go on social media and you want to, and you're exposed to the narrative, say about environment and green technology, you will read countless of different stories that shape your understanding and your opinion on this particular topic. It's not just one story who's going to do that. And so a story has typically a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like you see all those books behind me, they're pretty much all about storytelling, and they will all tell you the same. There is a story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's different story arcs and so on. A narrative is open-ended. Why? It's because a narrative is socially constructed. A narrative is a dynamic concept that evolves on a daily basis. In March 2020, we had a very clear narrative about the economy. In April of 2020, because of COVID, our narrative about the economy completely changed. Because all of the conversations all of a sudden are about COVID, about how we're going to survive and what's going to happen this, what's going to happen there. And we hear all of those stories about companies doing such a thing, companies doing another thing. Our narrative is changing. So our belief system is changing.
So as I used that example, I was thinking of that example as COVID, there was hundreds and hundreds of stories of how COVID was affecting businesses. And that became the narrative of like, we're going to a remote work, environment. The narrative was remote work, but the stories were everyone trying to deal with how do I deal with this infectious disease and get my job done and run my company. So one of the narratives that came out of that was this concept of remote and hybrid work environments, which didn't exist really to a large extent before that. So I think I understand the concept.
So a few more layers here. A narrative is also a point of view. It's a viewpoint. A narrative is never neutral. A story is a recount of fact and event. It's what it is. A narrative always shifts the way people think about something.
Right.
Another thing I want you to, and how does it apply to our businesses now? So here's the thing: we say, well, hey, you've got this great company. Tell me your company's story, and it's a problem right there. You don't have a company story. You have thousands of stories within your organizations. You have your founder story, you have your vision and mission and stories that illustrate this. You've got your customers, your whole market is bringing you back stories that adds to the narrative. And then there's of course your team, right? Your team join you and come to work and join you on your adventure, on your entrepreneurial adventure with their own story and their own narrative. So all of that is a complex system. And so what I've noticed over the years is that when we say, let's tell our story, we have no clue what story we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
No one knows. So you put everybody in the room, say, okay, let's tell our story. First of all, we don't even know what story we're supposed to tell. So I wanted to build a system to clarify this, which I did. I built a framework many years ago called the Strategic Narrative Canvas, which helps you organize what is it that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized is that once your narrative is more coherent, people seem to turn naturally towards the same direction. They start shooting and working towards the same overall goal. It's never perfectly aligned, but overall, your ship, if I may continue with that metaphor, is kind of going towards the same course.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like. That's what I like about the book, the way it's written. It's very visual, and you do use like vector arrows to talk about how alignment. So talk to us about why strategic narratives are so important to get alignment. That really stood out to me when I went through the book.
Well, I wanted to write a book that that breaks away from the typical literature on business storytelling that says the same thing. And I stepped back and I thought, what do business people care about? Do we care about being a better storyteller? No, we can't. Frankly, do you care? Do I care? I don't care. What I care about is that my business works better. And I care that people are aligned. That I care about. So I wanted to start my book with that truth that, hey, your business is about people working in the same direction, right? And so why does this matter? Is because alignment is not just about your team. It's think about a company as a congregation, as a group. At the basic human level, we gather through businesses because we want to serve people. We want to make a profit to feed our families and grow our communities and be it's a safety need. It's a health need, right? So we have those human relationships, and those human relationships really work if we all together kind of work together in the same direction. So that's why it's so essential. It's really hard because we're in days and age where there's so much information. We are challenged by being in the same workplace, so we are remotely dispersed. So how do you keep people thinking about similar things and thinking about things in a similar way? Or if there is divergence, no problem, but how do you bring people back remotely to discuss those gaps that you may have within your team or outside? So I think it's a critical topic that we see that shows through all our conversations about the workplace these days. The latest buzzword, the quiet quitting. You've heard about this, right? To me, that's a great example of misalignment in our society.
Yeah.
We're not even aligned anymore about why companies should exist in our relationship between somebody and a company.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Leadership skills are like any other skills. You need to practice them to get better at them. Best-selling leadership author John S. Rennie knows this. That's why he's written a new book called You Have the Watch. It's a guided journal for leaders designed to take you through an entire year of leadership training. By the end of the year, you will master 50 of the most important leadership skills. If you want to have a greater impact on the results and people in your organization, go to youhavethewatch.com and pick up your copy today.
This podcast is brought to you by Jeremy Clevenger Fitness. As a high-performing leader, you know that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about leading by example. And for most people, the one area they are lacking when it comes to leading by example is their health and fitness. By improving your health and fitness, every other area of your life improves. But how do you get and stay fit as a busy leader? Well, you do what you've always done. You hire the best person for the job. Now, don't struggle on your own. Put Jeremy Clevenger on your team. Jeremy will work with you to help take your physique, mindset, nutritional habits, and more to the next level with his step-by-step, all-inclusive coaching program. Now, I've worked with Jeremy for the past year, and I'm in the best shape of my life. So if you want to step up your game, reach out to Jeremy at jeremyclevengerfitness.com to find out more and get your initial consultation scheduled with him today. This episode is brought to you by the Fraternity of Excellence. The Fraternity of Excellence is an online and real-world community for men who are looking to improve in all areas of their lives. The men of FOE are working together to become better husbands, fathers, and leaders at work and in their communities. They live by a simple philosophy: as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Now, I've been a member for more than 3 years, and for me, I finally found a brotherhood of men that I was missing from my time in the military. Now, I love being around guys who are dedicated to becoming a better version of themselves. So if you're interested in becoming a man of excellence as well, go to fraternityofexcellence.com, or you can reach out directly to me to learn more. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you got me really thinking, because when I went through the material too, you know, like you said, when you're a smaller company like myself, right? I'm a small manufacturing company, right? So alignment's pretty easy because I know everybody by name. I know their wife's name. I know their dog's name. I know everything. So we're pretty much aligned because we're small. But I've also worked 22 years in corporate, and I've worked in companies where it was chaos. And you have some examples in the book of arrows going in all different directions. Everyone have different agendas and moving in different directions, and a real need for a flow of a strategic narrative in a certain direction that we're headed, and well communicated through the organization so that people knew where we were headed and we could be aligned. It seemed like the bigger the company is, the more that this it almost looks like chaos when you look at the direction everybody's heading in. And in some cases, people are heading in the opposite direction of what you're trying to.
And without noticing it, without even knowing it, like they think they're doing something that is the right thing, and then they don't realize that it's not. It's not because it's malintent. It's because they just can't picture this. So whose responsibility is it to fix this? Most people think, oh, narrative, that's a marketing thing. Ding, marketing. Let's redo our website. Let's change our mission statement, our vision statement. Let's redo our collateral. Let's new logo, new colors, please. That's the outside. Yes, it's part of the narrative, but maybe it's 20% at the most.
Right.
What matters is what's inside. How do you fix this inside? And even greater, even more important is what's outside. We are in an era where what you say doesn't matter. It's what they say, what your customers say, what your market says about you, what your partners, your investors, your whole ecosystem says about your company. You know, go on Glassdoor, all those sites about employment. You will read fascinating things about your company narrative that you didn't know about, that your marketing is completely out of the equation. So whose responsibility is this? It's the CEO's responsibility. It's the captain of the ship responsibility. What responsibility do you have? You don't have a responsibility to define exactly and prescribe and write it down and say, this is our narrative and that's what you're going to learn by heart. No, your responsibility is to bring people along and really be the facilitator of this new community. It's a new way to think about companies more as a movement. If you think about very famous movement leaders. And in the technology space, there are very famous CEOs that have really thought about their company as a movement first. They bring people together to say, we've got some serious changes happening here, or here is an idea for a new way to operate. Help me figure out this thing. I can't do this myself. I'm not going to tell you everything because I don't know everything. But your responsibility as a business leader is to acknowledge this, is to acknowledge that meta layer inside and outside your company that I call a narrative, and to say, hey, let's do something about it. I'm hearing statics here in the message. I'm hearing things that we say outside that don't match with what we're trying to do inside. It's actually impacting our delivery process, our product design process. It's impacting our suppliers. It's impacting maybe our quality in the work environment, our culture, and whatnot. And that's your job to do that.
So it's your job to listen for the static, listen for the arrows going in the different directions, and sort of getting them back aligned. I was just thinking, like if you think a company like Apple, right? And they are known for elegant designs and simple operating systems, and so if they were to come out with a product that was clunky, that was had too many buttons, it would be sort of opposite of the narrative, and it would be the leader's job to say, hey guys, this was a miss. Like, this is not aligned. This is not. Or a product that that is just not up to speed, or what we've known Apple to be, and so they quickly say, this is not aligned with our narrative. This needs to go away. We need to change course.
And I love this example, John, because this is exactly what happened in the late 90s when Steve Jobs left the company, and the company is starting to go down because they were launching products that were completely misaligned with the original narrative of Apple.
Yeah.
That he had shaped so carefully and so intentionally and so deeply into people's mind.
Right.
And so he came back to put the company back on track. And now there is leadership inside the company, and this company has gotten such a size that it seems to be, consistent with its original narrative.
Yeah. Talk to us about this idea of a true believer, and how a strategic narrative creates true believers. And are they just employees? Are they customers? Are they suppliers? Who become true believers?
There is not a particular status for a true believer. It could be a fan that you have. It could be a supporter. Okay. It could be somebody who has never bought one of a single product from you, but who just because they don't need it. But it could be somebody who just loves your company and wants to help you and wants to cheer you and say, "This is great. I really believe in you." Maybe they become investors. Mm-hmm. A true believer comes when you understand that people will buy a story. They will buy a story, but people will almost die for a narrative. Like, it's when you have achieved this level of alignment between what you believe, who you are as a leader, what you provide to the community, and what product you deliver, that is so coherent that people start seeing it, that it's highly relevant to them. And I'm going to give discretionary time, effort, attention to be part and to belong to this group. So let me give you some examples. Harley Davidson.
That's the one I was thinking of.
Oh, there you go. So, and I am using examples. It's not one of my clients, but I want to use that example because everybody knows it. I don't have to explain what they do. Harley Davidson has achieved almost a cult status, right?
Yeah.
People will gather together without Harley Davidson's marketing or whoever at Harley Davidson asking them to do so. They will gather together on a Sunday, create their own event, name their own group, because they are just such believers in what this company represents. Notice I don't use the term brand.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, but I rarely use the term brand. I use the term company or group or organization, because I want to explain that this is at the human level. Branding is one of the layers of that level, but I'm just maybe one level higher or on the right or on the side, but that's what it is. So True believers will do that for you. Here is another name of a company we have in Seattle called Mod Pizza. It's now national chain of 550 stores at this to this day. They just went public or about to go public, and this company is built around a very smart, very strong, very relevant strategic narrative, which is pizza as a platform for societal change.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Who thought about launching yet another pizza place in 2008 where there's a market saturated with pizza restaurants, and these founders go, well, pizza is important, but what's more important is to give people fair working conditions and jobs. And we can impact our society with the excuse of, it's almost an excuse. They wouldn't say that, but I say it. It's almost an excuse that we're going to use pizza to create that change. And so that's another example of a company who has a very strong strategic narrative and who has created true believers, people who truly believe that every time they go to a restaurant, not only they get outstanding product, they are not bothered by, do I get 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 toppings? It's the same price. But I do help this company who offers fair benefits to their employees and treat people, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's their belief.
We have one in town, and that's a place we'll stop by occasionally, and it's a good place to eat. And again, they hire people and they treat them right, and I think that's good. And they're consistent with their narrative for sure, even in our local restaurant. Yeah.
And another benefit I want to highlight for our listeners here is that once you do this, okay, not everybody has to agree that selling pizza this way is better for. You could disagree. It's fine. It's fine. You could say, no, I still like Domino's because the products is more my style. And really, your cause, I don't relate to it. Fine. But what this does for Mod Pizza is that it sets them apart. It differentiates them. What's the difference between Domino's and Pizza Hut? More cheese, less cheese, little. What's the difference between Domino's and Mod? The impact on society, and that people remember.
And people remember that, and they're attracted.
And they can better choose. Do I agree with that or not? So then my strategic position in the market is now an asset. And that's why I call it strategic narrative. It's because we build this for strategic purposes, not just because we want to have a cool story on our website. Who cares? Who cares about the cool story? Right. Great. You have I see all those websites now with our story. Great. Fantastic. I'm very happy for you. You have a cool story. It's a founder story that people, will resonate with. It's awesome. I don't deny it. But what is your narrative? Let's scratch the surface a little bit.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And so leaders who are listening into this and they're like, oh, wow, this is a good point. Like we have on our website, we have a story. We have our founding story, right? Like the first restaurant was opened in, 1971 in a small town in, Massachusetts. And they've got that story. But that's not a narrative. And so if leaders are listening in and they hear that and they say, this is really resonating with them, how do they get started with, how do I start thinking in terms of a narrative versus a story? Where do they get started?
So I have this simple framework that people can visually picture. It's really simple. It's really easy. Look at your company with you have four dimensions. One goes from inside to outside. So what's inside your company, your organization, what's outside, your environment, your customers, everything. And then look at it from the individual perspective to the collective perspective. Individual is you as a founder, as a leader, a CEO, and you can have also this dimension apply to maybe your other colleagues. In fact, anybody in the company. You don't have to be a title leader to feel like you belong at an individual level. So there are four areas that you need to look at. The first one is the individual and internal. How do you feel about your company? What's your level of passion? How are you aligned? How does this relate with your own life narrative? If you were the founder of a company that you built from scratch, typically you did it because there was some kind of calling or purpose or reason or something happened in your life that made you want to start this company. Either traumatic events or positive events. And so that's an area that I always encourage people to revisit because also it changes over time. many leaders will forget about why because we're so busy doing 100 things every day. We're like, why are we doing this again? We feel a little bit like, or sometimes we want to take some perspectives. That's the first thing. Start your diagnostic there, and then move to the three other dimensions. I don't want to turn this into a course. I have a course coming up, or you can go to my website if you're interested. But very briefly speaking, the next part to look into is, how does your company resonate with the outside, even with people who are not your customers? Like, does it make sense to them? Why is your company thinking that you're going to have a positive impact, out there? What is the result of your company? Can you tell us why it's important now, today? How is it relevant? The next dimension would be about your team, so collective and inside. Okay, what is it? How do you treat your team? Do you make them co-create? Do you allow them to co-create the goals, the vision, the processes? What's the perspective? What's the culture? How do you tackle tough challenges? Or like me, years ago, discussing elephants in the room. Mm-hmm. That's another facet of the narrative that has tons of stories you need to explore. And then final but not least is your product story and your customer stories, I should say stories, because there are so many. And that dimension needs to be explored. Once you have done this, then start by diagnosing those 4 dimensions and see where you see the gaps, and see what might be actually some strong assets. Mm-hmm. Some of those stories will come back over and over, and you will feel like, yeah, these are really why people want to work with us or buy from us. We've got to tell these more often. You have to repeat yourself. And I know it's one of the chapters in your book, John, that I really enjoyed so much, is about repetition. Like, we forget that we have to repeat ourselves every single day as a leader. We forget that. So start there. Step number 1 is diagnosing per those 4 dimensions.
I love it, and what I like about it in the book, you lay it out pretty easily. It flows. It's simple. It's easy to follow, and then you show examples of companies that are doing it well. And Mod was one of the examples in the book, that are doing it really well. And so, leaders, I just encourage you to pick up this resource, because it'll make you think differently about the idea of stories. Because I think up to this point, I've been thinking like you. I've read a lot of these books and about, writing your story and telling your story, and that's important, and this hero's journey and putting the customer in the hero as the hero. And I love that. And it resonates well with me, but I think you're right to say that all these stories exist in a bigger narrative. And what is the bigger narrative in your company? And is it aligned with what you're trying to be in the world? And I think that's the ultimate question here, that your book is helping leaders resolve and fix and make sure they're paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. I really I in my book I named 3 of my 3 examples. I admire those companies. In fact, last night I published another article with 15 examples of them.
Oh, great!
I constantly research them. I see this pattern now. It's like you've seen a red car once, and now all you see is red cars.
Yeah, exactly. That's
your own one. So same thing. For me, years ago, I'm like, gosh, I see this pattern. There's really that system. I see this, and I see this the CEO is doing the same thing over and over. Has anybody talked about this? Yeah. No. Well, okay, let me try to model this, and now I can see this. I mean, Oatly, they make oat milk. I'm looking at tons of very cool companies in Europe in the environment. Mimbly, they're changing the way we do laundry, and less water, less microplastics in the water, and they have an entirely new way to look at the laundry and laundromat industry in Europe. Co-working spaces. I mean, the list is very, very long. And then in the book, I give 10 examples of my clients, and I highlight the leadership principles that they mostly applied when working together to build their own narrative.
I think it's fantastic. And I think this is the resource leaders that you need to have to think in almost in a bigger picture of what what you're probably thinking today about your business. Think about the bigger picture and what's the impact that your company is making in the world. And I think it's more than just making widgets and making products. It's more about, are you making a difference? Yes. And I think that's what you're pointing to. And I think it's really powerful and it's really good stuff. Guillaume, how can people find out more about your company and the book that's out there?
Well, now that you know my company name, MetaHelm, just go to your web browser, everyone, and type in MetaHelm. At the top of my website, you will see a menu item that has my book. And right now, it's only an ebook for now. I'm working on a print version, and it's free. And I don't even ask for email because I just want this to be of use of people. So that's where you can go. If you really like what I do, check out my articles too. I publish 3 times a week on this topic religiously, and I continue to explore this theme.
So you heard it here first. We have a free resource for you to get better at strategic narratives. So go out there, read the articles, look at this ebook. I think it's fantastic. It's well written. The name of the book is Strategic Narrative, a simple method that business leaders can use to help everyone understand their business, get behind it, and believe in it. It's about creating true believers in your product, in your business, in your company, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
Not just the brand, it's the company, right?
I love it, John.
I do learn on this podcast
You're
as
very
well.
Good. You're a very good listener. Every great leader should be.
Well, Guillaume, this has been fantastic. So, and I really appreciate it. We'll put links in the show notes for all these resources so everybody can find them. But thanks for coming on the show today, and thanks for sharing this really interesting way to think about our companies and really what they're doing in the world.
Thank you so much, John. I commend you for bringing some kind of cuckoo guy, like French guy with this crazy idea to your show. It's a risky, it can be a risky thing sometimes.
But I think it's good. I think you're connecting the dots that I think a lot of us are seeing. And I think you're putting it in a framework that makes a lot of sense. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I really think this is unique. And I think we need to expose leaders to these kind of ideas.
Awesome. It was a joy to be here, John.
Oh, thanks again. It was great to have you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film podcast, 2 guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
the making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electricast.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.